The issue of support for labor has been with me since I was a child. My father used to tell us about how when he was a little boy, his father, who was a worker on the Rock Island Railroad, had taken him to hear Eugene V. Debs. And then in 1937, my father was a labor organizer for the then CIO when they were trying to unionize the Ford motor plant in Detroit. Later, my brother would work for Cesar Chavez in South Texas. So not only was that the family milieu that I was raised in, but also at that time, there seemed to be an indisputable understanding among Americans that if you supported labor like that, then of course you were a Democrat. And I remember when things seemed to change. I remember one day, I think it was maybe in the 80s, and I was with a friend, and we came up, I think it was in an airport, and there was a long picket line. I think it was pilots. And I said, oh gosh, we can't go in there, there's a picket line. Because I've been brought up that the worst thing you could be was a scab. That if you crossed the picket line, don't bother to come home. And my friend said to me, oh no, it's okay. You just go all the way down to the end of the line, and then you can go around. And I was kind of shocked to hear her say that. And I said to her, I thought you were a Democrat. And she said, oh, I am. And I thought, oh my God, what has happened in this country? And that was just one of many things I saw happening because I'm old enough to remember when it happened. I remember the devastation wrought when trickle-down economics became the order of the day. So it was all about lower taxes for the very wealthy and the demonization of labor. And thus began that $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% of Americans to that top 1%. Now, I remember the 1970s. So in the 1970s, the average American couple could afford a house, and they could afford a car, and they could afford a yearly vacation, and they could afford for one parent to stay home if they wished, and they could afford to send their kids to college. Because until the 1960s and 70s, there were tuition-free college and tech school situations. University of Florida, University of Texas, where I grew up, and University of California. All this began to change, and there was greater and greater despair as the thriving middle class that we knew in this country in the 1970s was basically decimated. Now, it was also in the 1970s that the Democratic Party began taking corporate donations. Before that time, the Democratic Party was the unequivocal advocates for the working people of the United States. Roosevelt's coattails were indisputable. He said that a necessitous man is not a free man. He stood against the overreach of what he called the corporate royalists. And when they came at him, he said, I welcome their hatred. He spoke not only of the freedoms of, but the freedoms from. Freedom from want and freedom from fear. But millions of Americans today, they're not free of want and they're not free of fear. When you have 70% of Americans who say that they live with constant economic anxiety, those people are not free of fear. When you have over 60% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, 1 in 4 Americans who live with medical debt, 70 to 90 million Americans who are either uninsured or underinsured, when we are the only advanced nation in the world that does not have universal health care. Of course we should have universal health care. Of course we should have free child care. Of course we should have universal paid family leave. Of course we should have tuition-free college and tech school. Now, as chairman of the DNC, it would be my job to make it undeniable in the minds of the American people what we as Democrats stand for. And that must be the unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States. What has happened, of course, is that at this point, there are far too many ways in which the Democratic Party tries to have it both ways. A sense that, yeah, we want to help you, we want to help the people, but we are not willing to go over the line past which to do so would be to offend our corporate donors. And who are those corporate donors? Those corporate donors are that matrix of corporate tyranny that now has infused its power into every sector of American society. Insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big agricultural companies, big chemical companies, big oil, gun manufacturers, although we certainly take a stand on that, and defense contractors. And the American people see this about us. You have to either stand by the people or not. You either stand by an expanded NLRB or you don't. You either call to account and hold accountable union busters or you don't. You either spend your political capital on the PRO Act or you don't. You either spend your political capital raising of the minimum wage or you don't. Now, this is the thing. There are Democrats in the House and in the Senate and in state houses all over this country, and governors, and all of the places where Democrats are in power on a state level, on a local level, as well as a federal level, who are out there every single day standing for the rights of the working people of the United States. The problem is, too often people don't know it. One of the things I've noticed about my Republican friends, sometimes I'll say, how can you stand this or that? And I'll be kind of shocked by their response. That they understand the issue. They have an analysis of the issue. They have statistics around the issue. All filtered, of course, through the lens of the Republican Party. Sometimes I think, you got this from more than watching Fox News. Yeah, absolutely. What it is that the Republican Party tends to their connection and their relationship with their base. We don't do that nearly enough, and that would be my job as chairman of the DNC. Because right now, in the session coming up, we won't have the megaphone. We won't have the megaphone of the presidency. We won't have the megaphone of the House Speaker. We won't have the megaphone of the Senate. And so the DNC must become the primary megaphone. So not only to articulate for people the ideals of the Democratic Party, the unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States, a stand against overreach by corporate tyranny. What is corporate tyranny? Corporate tyranny is the economic paradigm by which short-term profit maximization for huge corporate entities has replaced humanitarian and democratic ideals as the governing principle of the United States. But I would also be making sure that our electorate, and an expanded electorate all the time, knew what Democrats were doing for you. This is what Democrats are standing for, to help working people in the House. This is what they're doing in the Senate. This is what they're doing in your state legislature every single day. The American people need to be informed what the Democrats are doing for them when we are. And the American people need to know if these changes, which clearly would be in your economic interests, if they are of interest to you, this is how you can participate in the change. This is how you can be part of American history. And we will do our part. And yes, we will do everything possible to raise the minimum wage. Yes, we will do everything possible to fight poverty. What happened to the time when a Democratic president, Lyndon Johnson, said, let's eradicate poverty? That would be like a radical position today, but you know what? It's the position that the Democratic Party should take. We should get rid of things like block grants. We should get rid of things like all the ways that huge corporate interests are able to make it harder and harder and harder for the working people to unionize in this country. And we should not be afraid of saying so. Enough. The people know it. People on the right know it. People on the left know it. And when those people, all of them on the right and the left, know that the Democratic Party is here for you, those people will be here for us.